Hello and welcome back to the College Football UK podcast. Now, usually I would tell you about how I am joined by two stunning co-hosts who have been the same for the last couple of weeks, and that is still the same this week. I am joined by two absolutely stunning human beings. Just this week, one of them's a little bit different. Um, we have Gary, and instead of Sam, we have Nick with us. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good to see you, man. Great to be here. Had a good week. Glad to catch back up again. And Nick, I'm glad you're finally making your college football UK debut.
I am all good. Yeah, Power cut was 1 week. That was last week. Oh no, the week before, and then last week I couldn't do it anyway. So it was
Finally breaking your duck.
conspiring against me.
it's,
Well,
it's either that or you're doing that sort of late entry, just come here to save the day because everything else has been a mayhem for the last 2 weeks.
Well, I would hate to. I would hate to put a spin on it like that, but I've just turned up when I've been told to.
Which
and
is
we're
what as
grateful
blokes we
for
all
it.
do, right?
And we're grateful for it. We really are. So a couple of weeks ago, when we first started this, myself, Gary, and Sam all had the opportunity to kind of tell the world. Well, Gary and Sam actually got the opportunity to tell the world their amazing stories on how they got to follow their college football teams. I just admitted I was lazy, followed the Detroit Lions, and then just stuck with Michigan because I couldn't be bothered going much further down the line than that. So, Nick, would you like to just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself? Tell us how you got into your college team.
Yeah. Really, college football for me came as just an expansion of wanting more American football. You know, the NFL, the NFL's on on a Thursday night and on a Sunday and a Monday night, but college is on a Saturday. That's a whole nother day. We can get some more sport in. Um, so and it was you get that bug that you just want to you want to watch more, and so that was one. And I think the other aspect of it was watching watching players come into the league every year. You're relying on the professionals, the Mel Kipers, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Bucky Brooks. The You're relying on them to tell you everything you need to know about these new players. And it was like, well, I kind of sort of want to start learning myself. And so it just went from there, just sort of like trying to sort of pick up on initially who's coming up, who do I need to know about, and it sort of materialized from there. Now, as for a team, I am a Notre Dame fan. The reason being is twofold. One, they're the Fighting Irish, and I've got Irish heritage. And the other reason being that they are the guys who have a deal with NBC, who own Sky, who have a deal with
Mm-hmm.
Sky, and so therefore Notre Dame are on Sky more than any other
Yes.
college team. So it was sort of force of habit through beginning to see Notre Dame more than anybody else, and yeah, so that's how it's fallen that way.
It's an
I like
interesting
it.
the way you. Yeah, I like it because it's very similar, I think, to many people's way of dipping their
Mm-hmm.
toe into college football. You watch NFL and you see all these things. These players come out of these colleges, and most people are like, "Not really sure what that means." And then the draft comes around, and people get interested in it, and then they kind of start to expand. And that's similar to what you were saying there, Nick. You sort of like, "Oh, I watch football. There was an extra day of football. I could start to get interested in it." Start to get interested in the scene, the people graduating through the draft who were joining the NFL, and then it just eventually, it just leads you into this whole other realm. And it's great that as you say, in the UK, it's a real blessing that NBC, linked with Sky,
Yeah,
especially last year when we all struggled. I suppose that's another topic for later on, Fletch. When we all struggled in the UK to find college football coverage because it just died a death.
Yeah.
Having
and then
Sky,
Sky
having
signed
that,
that big
having
deal.
Sky,
Yeah,
having that Notre Dame, yeah, we'll at least show all the Fighting Irish games. It gave us something to watch, if nothing else.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so
There's another pin for another week there, Fletch. Coverage.
Yeah, I mean, right at the end of the season, Sky signed that big deal for 3 live college games every Saturday. Obviously, Notre Dame will be one of them if they're at home, but if they're away, you'll get 3 games that.
Yeah, it's basically they're showing the
Yeah.
ESPN coverage, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Good thing about that is College Game Day shows up on ESPN, which is like one of the best shows on a Saturday morning if you could ever imagine. Can't wait to get on that when it goes to Dublin, but that's a different thing. Anyway, jumping ahead. Sorry.
So last year I was at the College Classic. I was at the Notre Dame Navy game in Dublin. So I went on a freebie. I went on a doing press work, so didn't even have to pay for it. So
Nice.
very very nice beef stroganoff that the Aviva.
So imagine it was beef in Guinness, wasn't it? Beef in Guinness stroganoff, probably.
I'm sure there was probably some Guinness in there somewhere. But the amount of names you saw just sat in the press area. You had the Irish NFL podcast lads, and you had Phoebe Schechter was there, and Nat.
Yeah,
Coombs
she's an ambassador for them now, isn't she?
Yeah. Nat Coombs and his team was there. So they're in.
Oh, we need to get Ben on here. Actually, that'd be interesting. Anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've got tickets as a fan for this year's one. Obviously, the Seminoles are coming over to Dublin, so I was in early to get tickets for that one. So I can't wait for that and get on College Game Day, week 0. You heard, Nick, you're aware, I take it, that ESPN are bringing College Game Day over for that. So there's going to be the whole game day experience, screens, crazy fans behind them. They're bringing a whole lot, apparently. So
I'm on a flying visit to Dublin, so I'm literally like first flight out on the Saturday morning, last flight back to Manchester on the Saturday night.
I think we'll be sharing most of the stuff. We'll be doing the same thing. I think flying in early, leaving as late as possible. Anyway, sorry, Fletch, we probably got off tangent, but hey, this is the College Football UK podcast, right?
Yes, and do you know what? What we were going to do is get into a little bit of news. And actually, do you know what? That is a wonderful segue into the first bit of news that I have for us this week. In that, many of you may know that in August, Gary's Florida State,
Florida State Seminoles,
are due to play Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, it's not Boston College.
On August the 24th at Aviva Stadium, and I think it was this week. It was also now announced that the 2025 game will be Kansas State versus Iowa State at Aviva Stadium in Dublin. So and I think we don't know what the 2026 game is yet, but 2027 is Pittsburgh, Wisconsin. And that's
Wisconsin is 27. One great thing about that is it shows how important that Aer Lingus College Football Classic is becoming to college football. The market is obviously there, otherwise they wouldn't be extending it out and out and out and out for years to come. So it's an amazing thing, and as you say there, Nick, the college football, the Pro Football Ireland podcast guys, those guys over there, they're really banging a drum a lot for NFL and college football in Ireland, and all credit to Michael and the team over there. They're doing a bang-up job, and the fact that this college, and by the looks of it, Pittsburgh seem to have signed up. I think the Steelers will be playing at the Aviva Stadium pretty soon as well. So all credit to them. But yeah, really glad to see that this Aer Lingus Classic has revived itself after stopping for obviously COVID put a big stop to it. But it's come back, and it's come back with a vengeance. So it's great.
And on to slightly more news, I think just a couple of quick talking points is earlier today it was announced that Georgia have made Kirby Smart the highest paid coach in college football. He's on a 10-year, $130 million deal. This surpasses, he's the first ever $13+ million coach in college football. So essentially, that man is due to get a lot of money.
A lot of money over a lot of years, and the best or the worst thing or the best thing, and whatever, however you look at it, that's probably unlike the NFL and then whatever else. That's guaranteed money. So even if he gets sacked a year and a half into his 5-year tenure, he's still going to be getting paid $13 million a year for the next 8.5 years. It's mad. I think there's a coach at the moment, isn't there? Isn't there a coach who's getting paid to not coach this year an awful lot of money as well?
There's probably a couple, to be fair.
I'm sure there was a couple. I'm sure there was one that was like high profile one, but yeah.
And that
Yeah,
doesn't include
big news.
bonuses or anything like that.
No.
There will be other bonuses in there for playoff appearances, national championships, etc.
National championships, that sort of stuff.
In other news, slightly more, I guess, interesting news actually for us anyway. This is something we can actually participate in. College Football 25 has been announced to have multiple broadcast teams as part of the game. They will have multiple cover stars that apparently span over each conference. Yeah, essentially they're pulling out all the stops. It's going to be a wide variety of different things going on with the college game. The little bit of fun news, I guess it's fun. I don't know why this is news, but I'm just going to throw it in there anyway because it may have some repercussions later on. The Sanders family have got themselves into a little bit of Twitter beef over the last few days. That's been fun to watch as previous players under the Sanders regime in Colorado have come out and maybe called them out a little bit.
Xavier Wilson, was it? Was it Xavier Wilson?
Yeah, Xavier. It was Xavier something.
Xavier something. Oh, that's going to annoy me. Yeah, he came out to say they could have done it better, and then then Sean just come out and gone, "Who are you? Who cares?"
Yeah, like, basically. But it's kind of epitomised, I think, a lot of what some of the. I'm not saying I have an issue or don't have. I'm going to be very down the middle here on this one, but there are people who've had issues with the Sanders family in Colorado, and that's a little bit as to why. The other bit, I guess, news which I do want to actually throw to you both, gentlemen, properly is the transfer portal closed this week. There's been some very interesting transfer portal entrants and things like that. How have you guys felt that the transfer portal has gone? If you paid much attention to it, which I would hope.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about. Yeah, I think that's quite a big topic because a lot of that is, I think, as you say, players entering the transfer portal. Their deadline was the end of yesterday or something like that, a couple of days ago, right? So that's the transfer portal is in effect still open, so players can still exit the portal, but nobody can now enter the portal. The spring portal window is closed. You can't go back onto the transfer portal. What's really confused me.
I was sorry. What do you think was the most interesting move so far?
I apologise. I was just eating some toast.
I think the worrying side for me, I think the Hurricanes have done really bloody well out of it, and I think they picked up the Oregon State running back. It's going to annoy me. Darius. Darius something. Cam Ward and Darius something in the backfield of Miami Hurricanes. They look really good. They've got some proper weapons at wide receiver, a new QB who's come in there, and they've just picked up at least 1,000-yard rusher from Oregon State. I think that was the big news.
Oh, yeah.
For me, that was the one that I kept an eye on because I thought when he entered, it was obvious that he was going to enter from Oregon State because, as we mentioned in the previous shows, Oregon State are in a total state of limbo right now. But I thought going to Miami, that's not great. Miami have really come on. What's interesting is how many QBs have jumped into the portal.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite interested to see Malachi Wilson because obviously he's been at USC behind Caleb Williams, which is understandable. Now, Caleb Williams has gone to the NFL, he's graduated and everything else. You'd have thought this was his time.
Time to shine.
He's jumped ship to Boise State of all places. That's a 5-star prospect off to Boise State from USC. So it was one of those moves that sort of stuck in my head as one of those that I wasn't expecting to see. I
Yeah.
kind of thought he might be around. He might be in the USC sort of stable
Yeah.
for the year.
If he sat behind Caleb, then you think now's his chance to shine and
Yeah,
to go to
exactly.
Boise
One
State.
one interesting one for me was Jaden Rashada, going to Georgia from Arizona State. Because I think, well, Georgia have got Carson Beck, and Carson Beck is considered to be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks coming out of college football next season, going into the draft. Among a couple of the Alabama kid and Shadar Sanders in Colorado, which that's a
I think
story
he's
that
just
is
there for
definitely a
his
story
name.
for another
Yeah.
day. When I say we'll talk about that later, that's one we'll push back.
Definitely one for later.
It's definitely
yeah.
for another day. But I think, Jaden Rashada is a fantastic young quarterback going to Georgia is a very interesting one for me. And was it, I can't remember what his name, it's Damien or Dylan something, who transferred out of Colorado, who was a 4-star running back, was another interesting one. I mean, I think Colorado have struggled. They've lost a lot.
Did they
Colorado
lose
have
a lot, or
of.
did they send a lot out? Is the question, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, that's it. I think that Mr. Sanders, a lot of his identity has come through, or kind of his recruitment has come through sending a lot of players out the transfer portal, bringing a lot of players back in, which is maybe not the most sustainable of models in college football, but that time will tell on that one. But I think Colorado have lost a lot this year. I mean, they bring in a lot, but they've lost a lot as well this year. I was Dallin Hayden. No, Dallin Hayden went to Colorado, and it was Dylan Edwards. Nope. Yeah, Dylan Edwards left Colorado. And just a little bit more news. By the way, no. I want to say this one first. The best person to enter the transfer portal had to be General Booty.
Oh, just by name,
Best name in the
just by
transfer
name
portal.
alone.
Best name in
Best
the
name,
transfer
yeah,
portal.
absolutely.
Google it. It's an absolute fact. His name is General Booty. Someone whose name didn't go into the transfer portal, but if you do want a great name coming out of college, Memorable Factor from Duke, a linebacker.
Oh, what a great name that is.
But he's from London. I did not know that. I heard his name a few weeks ago, but Memorable Factor, linebacker for Duke, is from London. So
Is
that's
that
a fun one.
London, UK, or is that London?
Yes.
Yeah, just double checking because sometimes they.
Yes, and I think he comes from a very, very wealthy upper class. He did a lot of rowing and rugby and things like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
And in final bit of news, the NCAA are in talks at this moment in time to settle the NIL antitrust case. So that is another
This is
big,
House
big
versus
one.
NCAA, right?
This is
that
House
one.
versus NCAA, and something we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. You brought up, actually, Garrett, a couple of weeks ago. Lots of people are very unhappy with the NCAA at the moment, and a lawsuit has been brought to them. That is a lawsuit that, again, I'm just gonna rename the podcast now, so we'll talk about that later.
College Football UK. We'll talk about it later.
No, we'll talk about it later. College football. We'll talk about it later. I think needs to be the leading part of this. It's the thing we say most. But the NCAA's case against the House, people are suing. The NCAA are being sued if that lawsuit was to pass in court and judges were to rule in favour of House. That would cost the NCAA more money than they could possibly have.
They're dying, and it's dying on its back.
It will break it. It will absolutely shatter the whole premise of the NCAA.
I mean,
if
they've had their stronghold. They've had their hands around the neck, and the necks of all the teams and whatever. They just need to give it up, restructure the whole thing. They kind of, tear the guts out of it and start all over again. Really, it's called the college game. The college game has moved on. The college game has advanced so much that it's not fit for purpose anymore. And so at that point, you either have to completely restructure and move forward, or you just cease to be and you die as you are, because you cannot function in the format that you currently exist.
Yeah, and I think as we talked on previous episodes, though, Fletch, the NCAA, although we're very centrally, we're very focused on football here, the NCAA does so many other sports that if it has to collapse under the weight of this debt, and for those who are not really sure what House v NCAA is, I'll just give it a quick overview, if you don't mind, Fletch. It's basically a couple of years ago, can't remember when it was, 2020, when the original court case was raised, and it was originally found that the NCAA were going against the law, and therefore players could use their own names, images, and likenesses, as we've mentioned. That basically opened a can of worms whereby the money that had been earned, raised, whatever you want to call it, for the NCAA for previous generations, the last 20 years, all of those athletes were suddenly like going, hey, hang on a minute, we deserve a piece of that because it's just been proven in a court of law that what you were doing by earning all that money on the basis on these student athletes was actually illegal. The court of law has just stated that's illegal. So obviously that's now opened a civil court case, whatever you want to call it, a class action lawsuit where basically all ex-athletes, ex-NCAA athletes, and let's be honest, we're probably talking the high-end Heisman Trophy winners and the number one draft picks, and the ones that were big names at the time have suddenly gone, we kind of deserve a piece of all of that money that you guys have earned. I was hearing, if this House v NCAA goes in the way of House, and House is just kind of obviously the government wins or everybody wins, that could cost the NCAA as an organisation
Billions.
in the region of $40 billion. It's like no organisation, no matter how much money is floating around from TV revenue and stuff like that, has that sort of change lying around in the back pockets to pay everyone. It would absolutely cripple them. The only downside I see, and I don't see a downside of the players and the ex-players getting some of their money that they're deserving, because as you say, Nick, the NCAA has had their hands around the throat of student athletes for years. The only downside is all of the non-profitable sports in the US that are under the NCAA banner could crumble. Maybe not basketball, but a lot of the softball and the women's soccer and all the stuff that gets funded from the NCAA, which usually filters down from football, could just disappear, and that's a shame. But it's a big seismic change going on.
I think what would be an interesting topic, these topics, especially right now, there is so much going on that to kind of gloss over them in these senses almost just doesn't do the topics justice. So I think one thing that would be really nice is over the next couple of weeks to have this be an actual topic of something that we can delve a little bit deeper into, give I think that's a bit more number to it, a bit more meat to it, a bit more weight to it. But this is a huge these are huge things that are happening in the realms of college football, and like you said there though, Gary, like college gymnastics, college basketball, college netball, college, like all these different sports are affected by this, not just college football. But college football is primarily at the center of a lot of it. So in order to kind of move, there is a little bit of this that's also relevant in the main topic today, which is what we're going to start to move on to, is
just to say, before we jump onto the main topic, this is highlighting all those couple of episodes that we've already delved into, where we've been saying all the way through, the theme is the current landscape of college football is changing massively. It's completely changing now with everything that's going on with the NIL and all that sort of stuff, and the realignments, as we touched on last week. This is just another thing on layers and layers. So this podcast and what we talk about now is correct at time of going to print. In a couple of weeks' time, who knows where we're going to be? It's madness at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important that we do say that as well. And given the scale of information that's out there, of people making guesses as to what's going on, as small pieces of information that are missing. We are trying our hardest as people from across the pond to give the most accurate information, but even some of the information that we do get might be slightly. It, we're trying like the research that we do prior to this is as much as we can do physically within our limitations at home, but we're trying to just give you accurate representations, but a lot of this is in the air, a lot of it. And there are people who are involved at the top level of this who cannot give accurate information because they don't know. So yeah, as we move on to the main topic, this one involves Gary's very own Florida State. If we've spoken over the last couple, one of the things we spoke about was conference realignments, and we've spoken about two in particular conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC having lots of money and lots of very, very big schools. We spoke about the Autonomous Five and what that means for five conferences, or otherwise considered the Power Five, that are considered five conferences, or we'll get onto that in a sec. Five conferences that have the most money, that have the biggest weight, that have the most say and pull and draw, and how they've now gone down to four because of a load of things that are changing. One of the things that has changed recently, one of the big stories that's hit recently, is that two teams in Florida State University and Clemson University, who, if you aren't already pretty familiar with college football, you might know Trevor Lawrence came from Clemson University, are suing their own conference. And this is the impact that this has on wider college football, and the impact that this has on various different pieces is huge, and it's something that I think we need to talk about because it encapsulates a lot of what's changing. Gary, I realise I might be butchering that introduction to the topic ever so slightly. Would you like, as a Florida State fan, would you like to, I guess, give us a little bit more?
I'll put some
meat on the
added
bones.
bits around that. I'll put some meat on the bone. So, in a nutshell, you're correct. The whole conference realignment has stirred up a few things, but the unrest, shall we say, within the ACC has been there for a while. Particularly, as you mentioned, FSU and Clemson being two of the biggest, and when I say bigger, I mean TV revenue, TV viewing figures, support, etc. Two of the bigger colleges in this conference. Okay, they bring in the majority of the money because they are the ones that most people watch, etc., etc. So they've been a little bit. There's been grumblings and they've been unhappy for a while in the fact that the ACC is so imbalanced. There are two, maybe three strong teams in the ACC every year, and a lot of other filler teams. You can guarantee, three or four teams at the top, and everything else is just a bit rubbish. So, ACC signed a long-term television deal and signed their respective colleges up to what was called the Grant of Rights. Now, this agreement amongst all of the ACC, and everyone signed it, and hands up, FSU happily signed it at the time because there wasn't much else on the table, and new contracts hadn't been made, etc., etc. And it was there; they were part of the conference, therefore they signed it. But this Grant of Rights basically handcuffed all of the teams in the ACC to the ACC until 2036.
Yeah.
So that's, I think it was like a 20-year deal, or it was something insane. But as I say, at the time, all the teams signed up for it because it was on the table and nobody was really aware of the ins and outs of college football life and where it was moving. It seemed okay at the time. What came to pass quite quickly after that was that other conferences, smaller or bigger or equal sized conferences, went out and signed conference deals with other networkers and other TV networks, vastly, vastly improved. So a lot more money, SEC, Big Ten, they signed deals with ESPN, etc., for a lot of more money. So the teams in the ACC were kind of like, hang on, we're not quite happy with that. So grumble is to be going on, but eventually, what happened when the realignment with the Pac-12 happened, as we've mentioned in previous ones, when the Pac-12 started to dissolve, Florida State were kind of like, okay, we need to kind of, can we get out of this contract? And lawyers have delved into this grant of rights contract and grant of rights agreements. It's now been called a grant of rights agreement. I have to be careful with that because it's not a contract; it's an agreement now. Legally, starting to kick in already, as you can tell. So, whether or not the grant of rights agreement is legally binding, or if it's actually inherently wrong, and therefore that hence the suing of the ACC. So FSU bit the bullet. They were the first ones in the ACC to say, right, we are going to sue the ACC, and it's not they're not suing the ACC for money. They're suing the ACC to get out of this grant of rights because they,
Yeah.
in effect, want to join the big parties over the other side of the conference where the big pot of money is because teams in the Big Ten and the SEC are getting vastly more money from their television contracts than FSU and Clemson and other teams, even though FSU, Clemson, and other teams are on a par in terms of television revenue that they could potentially get. So that's where it kind of all started. And then, as I say, FSU were the first team to put their head above the parapet, get annoyed. To be honest, it didn't help that the College Football Committee decided to snub FSU last year. I think that was probably the final straw where they went, if we were in a bigger conference, this wouldn't have happened to us. Because we're in the ACC and the ACC is viewed as a smaller conference, that was it. That was the final straw. And that's when they went all guns blazing, put the lawsuit in to say, right, we are suing the ACC. We want out of here. We want part of that bigger pot of money. Get us out of here. Clemson came along a couple of months later. At the time, it was huge that Clemson joined the lawsuit. Not joined it, but brought their own lawsuit. It's a separate one. But at the time, it was FSU with a lone voice, and everyone was like, "Oh, you're just a bit upset about what just happened." The fact that Clemson have now come and said, "Actually, we've got a lawsuit. We want to do the same," has left the ACC in a bit of problems.
Yeah. Everyone basically just turned around and me just a bit salty. He's just a bit salty.
Get over it. It's just college. Everyone knew it's a college committee. You signed up for it, but
as per the Tomahawk Nation, the Florida State Seminoles SB Nation, that kind of group thing. The official timeline goes as far back as 2010. A lot of this has been going on for quite a while. None of this is actually new. And one thing that actually, Nick, you might be able to. There's something particularly kind of think you can weigh on in a second as a Notre Dame fan specifically. But going back to July 2010, the ACC, like you say, signed a 12-year deal with ESPN. That deal was a little bit dodgy, as the director of the ACC at the time, there was a company. I'm not 100% sure if they're just kind of a partner company within it, or whether they were a kind of a mediator as part of, I guess, the ESPN deal. But there was a media company, TV company involved in this deal, but got a lot of money. Just so happened to be the ACC director's son. Just so happened to be playing a huge part in that. That deal saved the company, and many people felt that more rights were given for less money than should have been. But so it was a bit of a dodgy deal. No one was quite sure what was going on with this deal, why such a deal was signed, until not a bit later on when they found out his son was involved in all of this stuff. In May 2012, the ACC renegotiated the deal through 2027. Couple of months later, Maryland, who were in the ACC at the time, went, bugger this, your deal's crap, I'm going. Don't want to be part of it. The ACC, to use that Michael Jordan meme, took that personally and said to all members of the ACC at the time to sign the grant of rights. as part of this ESPN deal. In that request for the grant of rights, where every team gave up all the rights to their home games and media distribution and all that sort of stuff, which again, speaking on Nick there, one of the similar deals that Notre Dame has is why we get home games on Sky Sports,
Yeah.
because of a very similar deal with NBC.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, NBC are a minority owner, or minority contribution, not an owner. NBC provide Notre Dame football with a minority contribution towards their their football program. Now, we're not
Scholarship
talking.
funds. And,
Yeah, we're not talking millions or anything like that. It's a a very subsidized thing where, like you said, they'll pay, I don't know, say for example $100,000, and it might buy some new equipment, or it might buy
Yeah.
and it's just sort of like a behind the scenes handshake of let's and
Yeah.
I think it's something to do, and don't quote me on it as being fact, but I think it's something to do with one of the guys who is like high up in NBC Sports is he's an
Yeah.
alumni of Notre Dame, and so it's like trying to give back to his
Yeah.
sort of college. I don't. There's certainly nothing underhanded with it, but I think it's just
No.
part and parcel of the way it is, and all colleges are trying to go out and get that little bit of extra money from here and from there, and so.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we talked about that last week, Fletch, about ex-alumni and donating back to the the colleges that they went to. And as Nick says, that's probably just exactly what it is. It just so happens to be he works for NBC, but he wants to give back,
Yeah.
and it's above board. Everyone's happy with it. It's doing well. Notre Dame. It's so weird to say it, and they're an unusual college, and because of their independent status and stuff. So they sit slightly outside of a lot of these conferences in terms of the political stuff like that. But it's the same idea, that the money that they get is minimal, but it means they're tied to that network.
Yeah. So that was all done in March 2013, and in that grant of rights request for all ACC members was requested. It was proposed they would make the ACC network with ESPN, which again kind of encompasses a lot of the sport. It's where you can go get the sports, watch the sports from the ACC, all that kind of thing. Big Ten have one, and I think most conferences now have their own network. And a lot of that was down to the fact that they didn't want anyone else to leave out of Maryland because of Maryland. After losing Maryland, a month later, the ACC announced that all current members had signed a grant of rights through. The research I did didn't give an official date or kind of year at this point, but they had all signed a grant of rights, all ACC members. Then fast forward, when they signed it, they got no assurances of when this ACC network would happen, or even if it would definitely happen. But they had to sign it just in case, because it was a thing that they were going to work on and try to make happen. Now, fast forward a couple of years into June 2016, the ACC network, we all found out, would not launch until 2019. However, ESPN were holding it over the ACC a little bit and basically said, unless you get all members to sign, that it might happen as long as you get all members to sign a new grant of rights deal through 2036. As Gary has already mentioned there, 2036. That will be when the deal runs out at a minimum. But the 2019 ACC network may or may not happen, but definitely wouldn't happen if everybody didn't sign this grant of rights. So it was hung over their heads a little bit. And ESPN then said, we'll maybe give you a few more dollars for the deal and we'll extend it and give the option of extending it past 2027. Then fast forward a couple more years, and the ACC network launches in March 2019, but not in all ACC markets, and that would be worked up for the next 2 years until 2021, where they get it in all ACC markets. In November 2022, now this is where it gets juicy. This is where it really starts to get
This is
fun.
where the fun really starts.
In November 2022, FSU's athletic director gave a presentation to Florida State Board of Trustees showing the growing financial gap between the ACC, the Big Ten and SEC. And he made... No, that wasn't the time. That was not the time. Oh, no, sorry. This was, November 2022, he gave to the Board of Trustees claiming that FSU would be a top 5 revenue earner in both the Big Ten and SEC. Something that I think, again, Gary, you've already alluded to. FSU is not a small college. They make a lot of money. They get a lot of bums on seats and are easily one of, if not the biggest, in the ACC. In February 2023, FSU's athletics department put a tweet out saying that yet again for the past 7 years, FSU have the highest TV ratings, and it's not close. I think 3.17 million average viewers per game, every game. They bring in the most viewers, and it was considered to basically be FSU now publicly taking little shots and showcasing, look at us, look how good we are. Later that month, the FSU athletic director again gave a presentation to the Board of Trustees, this time where he said the growing financial gap between the ACC the Big Ten SEC, with the the potentially infamous quote, "Something has to change." And that's how he closed that meeting, saying something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
In May of that year, in May of 2023, the Magnificent Seven, which I just think is the best name ever.
Great name for a bunch of colleges.
Exactly. In
do
Florida
you know
State,
who they are?
Clemson, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, North Carolina State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. If anyone's watching on kind of the video version, my camera cut out. I didn't just kind of stop the video so you can't see me looking at a laptop screen next to it. It was totally legit that I knew all of that off the top of my head.
I just rolled them off the top of your tongue. Yeah.
Exactly. It's how much I love this, that I know that. They were all seeking avenues to leave the ACC and get out of this grant of rights. Up until this point, I think that we'll get on to we'll move on to the next bit in a second, because I realise I'm monologuing a lot here, I guess, and kind of timelining a bit, but a lot of what I'm saying has been already technically repeated. So let's get up to this point. Notre Dame have not had to deal with some of this because you are an independent school,
even though they play in the ACC most of the time. And there's an agreement they play in the ACC.
But
they sit.
Legally, they don't deal with the legalese. So, Notre Dame sit down as an independent. Gary, we've got to move on to you first. As Florida State and someone who's followed Florida State for a while, what is your take on a lot of this? As it's your school that's really led the charge of kind of taking it to the ACC.
Yeah. It's twofold, I suppose. It's twofold. As you say, we signed the agreement back in the day because it was being we were kind of foot to the throat to, you kind of got to sign it with everybody else, otherwise you get no money. And, at the time, the money wasn't, college football wasn't that awash with money. There was still money in it, but it wasn't like as much as floating around now. So it kind of, although everyone's like, well, you signed it, you should stick to your agreements. The agreements were kind of had to be signed with one arm tied behind your back and one foot on the throat type thing. So from that side of things, it's like, yeah, maybe they should have been a bit more sensible and check the wording and get some legal ideas and have a look at that wording to make sure it wasn't so ironclad, or having to, there should have been an out on there if as has become more apparent, you know contracts and money and everything else is starting to be so disparate between the conferences that it becomes an uneven playing field. And I'm sure they should have worded it in such a way that this grant of rights is beneficial for all of the ACC until such time as it becomes detrimental to the success of the ACC. And that could have been a way of getting around the wording, because it is detrimental now because the other conferences are making so much more money out of so many more different contracts and re-signs, etc. That there should have been the ability to renegotiate or come out of it. I do think it's a bit of a money grab, to be honest. I think there's money. It's being obviously led by money, and as we've talked about in previous episodes, money is a major factor in football, and in college football. So I think there's a lot of it. It's all about the money. Some of it could be, and as I mentioned, some of it could be around competitiveness, because you can guarantee at the top of the ACC this year will be Clemson, FSU, probably Miami. And then next year, you can probably guarantee, if nothing changes, that at the top of the ACC will be Clemson, FSU, probably Miami. It doesn't change an awful lot, because it's just the nature, as I just mentioned. Those are the three big teams. Those are the ones that bring the money in. Those are the ones that bring the revenue in. They are just bigger and better schools. So you can see that maybe looking at the grass is greener. The Pac-12 dissolving, the SEC suddenly getting all these big schools joining. There's a lot more competition in some of those other conferences. I think it's money, but then I do think it's saltiness. I do think it's a slight aggrieved feeling in regards to not being allowed in the national championship, and the committee not agreeing to put them in because the strength of schedule was weaker. It's like, well, put us in with the big boys and we'll show you. So I think there's a bit of that as well.
Nick, what would your take be, I guess, up to this point where we've got a clear growing disparity between, at this point, you've got the Big Ten and the SEC who are pulling away from even what was the other two conferences within the Power or Autonomous Five, which is the Pac-12 were closing down, but the Big 12 and the ACC. What would kind of, I think, what your kind of takes, I guess, at this point on the growing disparity between them? Do you think it's a bit more of a TV money thing? Do you think it's a purely competitive thing? Is there anything that's going on that for you?
I think you're at that point now where how do you fix what is wrong? Because you've got all this structure that's in place, and you've got these people, you've got these colleges earning this money, you've got these colleges earning this money, and no one wants to give up their pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but everyone wants to chase their own gold, if you like. Now, this kind of rolls into the NCAA thing, in that I think the best thing for college football is to just absolutely burn the thing to the ground and start afresh with absolutely everything in a similar format to what the professional league what the NFL has. You can have multiple divisions of 6 teams, 7 teams, 8, call it 6 or 8 teams, and you can have, I don't know, 10 divisions or whatever, and you can have your 4 conferences. And if you restructure the whole thing and you bring it all under one banner, bring all the TV rights under one banner, bring all the legal stuff under that same one banner, and then each school can attract its recruits however they choose to attract them legally, providing they're legally attracting their recruits, not an issue. Do it however you want. And if you move forward from that point, you're then at the point where everyone has that same fair chance to make the playoffs, be in the championship game. I think when you've got the problem with the NCAA and you've got all these rights issues and some colleges feeling hard done by, the only way you are going to fix everything is to completely rip it all up and start again. And that's maybe the only action facing that can be done. Otherwise, you're going to be upsetting somebody. Somebody's not going to be happy, and they'll all put a pin in it and say, "No, I'm not doing that."
So I'm just going to throw this as an idea out there. This could be me being obtuse, and I'm very aware that this could be me being obtuse. Do you not run the risk again of a lot of this over the years has come about because, let's say, your Michigans of the world, your Ohio States, your Alabamas, your Georgias, just say, for example, saying, we make this money, we make more money than you, we generally put on a better on-field product than you, which means we sell more seats and we sell more merchandise. So look, all this extra money that we make than you, we deserve more. What we should get should be bigger than what you get. And my thought here, and this is kind of what I want to throw to it might be me and obtuse or not thinking about things that I guess in the same way that you are. Do you not run the risk of you do all of that and then you try and go on, say, an equal shared revenue of saying we make maybe not the right number, but 500 million, and there's 50 schools in this, so every school gets 10 million. I'm just thinking of an easy mathematical problem to do here.
Yeah.
It's Friday night. I'm not doing too much.
You're not going to go into points and whatever else.
Yeah, you run the risk then, I think, of Michigan turning around and saying, excuse me, no chance. Do you think we want Boise State earning 10 million while we earn 10 million? Are you having a giggle? Or do you go up? So then you'd go on the kind of the sliding model
sliding
of
scale,
success.
tiered structure or something.
Yeah, this team sees more success, so that team sees more money. The team sees the least success, sees the least money. But then someone, like you say, there's always going to be someone who's upset by it. There's always going to be someone who's left out. And one of the suggestions that's been made recently is the Super League, the College Super League, where there is even a relegation and a promotion to incentivize some of that and at least provide some of the whole. If you aren't performing, you get relegated into a lower division, and if you do perform, you have the option to go and earn. So yeah, basically this what I'm throwing to you here is like, how would you look at that and try and walk away, I guess, from the idea of the Michigans and Ohio States kicking off in 5 years' time because they're not making enough money in comparison to another school?
I get, and I agree a little bit with Nick there. I think college football possibly needs to be separate from the NCAA. I think the NCAA has a great purpose for college athletics and other sports, but I think college football has just become so much bigger and so much more complex. It needs to almost be, as you say, run as an organization separately now, as as college football or whatever you can't call it NCAA because it might be associated with, but it can't be governed by the NCAA because I think it's just too big, too complex. It needs professionals to run this now. It's got so big. So I do agree with that and kind of stripping the functionality of what the NCAA governance is. How you structure it and how you do it, I have no idea. Yes, maybe equal shares, equal leagues, equal divisions, whatever else. I think from a money situation and what you were just talking there, I wonder if in a sliding scale of what your final, and this is where it gets, this is, I can't imagine how to do it, but what's your final standings at the end of the year? If you're ranked 1 to 10, then basically the number one team gets more money because they became first. I'm thinking almost like a Formula One way of doing it. So you're the best team, you got the most points, therefore this year you get the most money. Yes, sometimes what that could lead to is the rich getting richer, but it is based on merit and it is kind of based on your seasonal record. So if you get a team that suddenly has a great season and has a good recruiting class, whatever else, and they jump up, well, that year they get rewarded for it because they finish higher up in the league and they get more of the pot. And the pot, as you say, is you can't go, here's a $500 million pot and everybody gets the same, because you will get colleges that will just go,
Yeah.
that tiny college over there can't getting the same amount of money that I'm getting. That's just not right. But if
Yeah,
it's done on a sliding
I
scale
think
and you get 1 point,
I think there is a truth to that. I think a similar option would be, maybe, I don't know. You look at the total revenue pot that the college football system makes, and I don't know. It made 500 million. That's the total pot. So okay, that total pot is going to be split into two segments. The first pie is going to be split between every single college fairly. Every college gets the same amount, and that is your participation payment. That is your payment for being part of the league. That is your payment for being part of the competition. Thank you for turning up this season. There's your pot. There's your pot. The other 250 million is split amongst, I don't know, however many divisions you choose to have, however many conferences you choose to have, and then it's split again based on, you know, in each division, the top team gets more, the second team gets a little less, the third team gets, and so you are essentially, half the money that is made is given to teams based on reward, but the other half of the money is a fair payment to everybody for being part of the league, if you like. So it's
part of
almost,
the show. Yeah.
yeah, it's almost similar to the current structure um, in the Premier League, in that everyone gets the same amount of money. So, like in the Premier League, all the foreign TV money is split evenly. It's the domestic TV money that then is put into the pot, for the top team gets the most and the bottom team gets the least. But all the foreign TV money is split on a you know fair level between all 20 teams. So it's maybe a system like that where you're saying, look, everyone's part of this league, so everyone deserves a payment that is equal, and then we will reward the teams that are successful. We will reward the teams that bring in the most money by, I don't know, they get to keep a percentage of their income before they send the rest to the pot. I don't know. These are things you work out based on, this is, you get all the colleges together and you talk about, this is how we want to move forward. What are your opinions on how the league moves forward? And you've got a group of people that want to earn money, that want to progress, that want to be there. You should be able to find a common ground between everybody.
I think that's fair. And I think we've mentioned before, I mean, the Premier League runs itself as a slightly separate business in comparison to the Football League.
Yeah.
The way that it seems to that it runs business and has done since like the 90s. But you're right. Every team gets at least a base payment of, say, in the Premier League, of say 110 million. But there are still incentive-based figures on a slightly
Yeah.
separate pot that all kind of get lumped in. So if you win the league, then let's word it slightly better and easier for everyone. Manchester City get that payment every year, and then whoever comes second and third and fourth, however, win. Like how through that one, no, okay. The
We'll let you get away with it just this once, and the next year only.
yeah. Anyway, but
I
yeah,
didn't see
you're right. I
anything
think
wrong
you're
with
right.
it.
It's fair. You've got a base payment. The 20th in the Premier League is going to get at least 110 million. And so's 19th, so's 18th. And then your winners, again, probably Manchester City every year, will get, say, the 100 million, and it kind of deducts from that.
Yeah.
And it's a very it's a great way of looking at it. But then I think, yeah, you run into the risk of, we look at this Super League that's been proposed. In how are you going to truly and again, I'm going to kind of throw an example of something that's happened very recently in college football with regards to Florida State. Florida State went unbeaten this season, did not lose a single game. Then they go towards the college football playoff selection committee and they say, you're 13-0, you didn't lose a game, that's great. But we don't think your 13-0 is as good as someone else's, say 12-1 or 11-2, because they played harder opponents. They played more difficult games. So actually, their 11 wins are better than your 13. And it could be, I guess. Could you imagine turning around to the Arsenal Invincibles and telling them that, yeah, they were great, but the Premier League was quite weak that year? So Real Madrid, who lost 5 games 10 years ago, that league was a bit more difficult. So it's easy. So what do you get in terms of, and I think I'm kind of hinting at you towards a relegation promotion thing here, but it doesn't have to be. In 5 years' time, we have this deal. We have this kind of league, this league system in place where everyone's getting it, and overall, everybody's happy with that system for the most part. There are a couple of people who still feel like they're getting shafted, but it is what it is. But you have a Florida State who go 13-0, and you still have a similar playoff, because you've got to have a playoff. You've got to have a national champion that isn't just over 13 games. That's not enough to come up with one single. Not enough games have been played. How do you come up to the position of a 13-0? How are you coming to that decision of a team like that say finishes 13-0, but doesn't get the same opportunities as a team that walks away with only 8 wins, for example?
It depends. It depends how you structure it, though. And I mean, in the example that I gave, if you've got, for argument's sake, 12 divisions, and each division winner and divisions, if every division is sort of balanced, and you try and balance the teams as evenly as you can, then effectively, if you in a similar system to what the NFL have, if you finish top of your division, you're guaranteed a playoff spot, and so on. And that way you are rewarding every single team that wins, that performs and gets 13-0 or 12-1, depending on what wins your league. But if you play well enough to earn the right, then it doesn't matter what the committee say, because you change the whole. And again, it depends on how you're going to do this, and how.
Yeah.
And there's so many issues that obviously arise that you just have to make a decision on where you go from here and moving forward. So it's like a can of worms. You open a can of worms, and you've got to somehow fit them all. You've got to put them all back in at some point. So
Yeah. It's like opening Pandora's box, isn't it? It's literally that.
Yeah.
As soon as you start looking at it, you go, "Oh, well, we've added that, we've done that." As you say, "All right, so there's playoffs." So then you're going, so it's a 24-team playoff because it's top 12, so it's top winners and the second place, right? So, but then if we're talking about the winner and the second place getting more money, then won't the winners in the second place always be the winners in the second place constantly, and therefore the league structure starts to fall apart because those two top teams who are always winning and getting a bit more money every year get better and better and better, and the teams,
Yeah,
the
again,
players
you
go
then
together,
have to you then
and
have to
we're in
look
that.
at yeah, you have to look at how you're going to do
Capping
it.
it.
You know, do you do a similar thing to the NFL? The NFL have got where it's strength on schedule, and if you finish top of your division, you have harder games than the team that finishes sixth because they play lower qual, and you're trying to keep that level playing field as best as you can
Yeah.
while rewarding success. And if you there is a it's a tricky path to navigate, but there is a
Yeah.
possible way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost asking college football to take the best of the NFL system and then take different sports and look at the systems that they do and operate and say, what fits our sport and where can we be and how are we going to do this so that everybody is at least happy enough. You're not going to
Yeah.
get everybody delighted. That's you
No.
said that.
But
So
it
all
will
you're trying
keep the
to do
sport
is
alive, and
yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
Um, but I guess, and this is the point, and I think for the first time we've actually had someone who's about a solution here, not just joining and talking about the problems. This is our first time doing this, so with Nick, this is alien to us so far. It's greatly appreciated, but I think what I'm trying to do is I think trying to. I think I agree with your point though with this whole kind of you can't please everybody. You look at the what would seem to be a fair working is like you say, if you have X amount of divisions / conferences, each winner definitely gets into the college football playoffs and maybe even definitely gets a home tie in the first round. If not, one team gets, but you work it similar to the NFL playoffs. That could work. However, what you always get in the NFL is every year there's one horrible division where every team is terrible. We look at right now, we're all looking at the NFC South right now. I can see you all saying NFC South team names because the NFC South is that division that right now it's a terrible division, but your Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year, okay, we're on a good run towards the end of the season, but they got into the not college football playoffs. I'd be lucky if they did. They got
Yeah,
into the
they
NFL
probably wouldn't have
playoffs
made
with a
that.
home tie
Yeah.
because of the sheer luck of being able to just so happen to be the team that crosses the line at the end of the season. That you stumble over the line better than New Orleans Saints stumble over the line. And everybody gets a complaint because you've got a 10-7 team or a 9-8 team who doesn't get into the playoffs at the expense of a 8-9.
Eight and so yeah. I mean, it happened a few years ago as well. The NFC East, didn't it, or whatever it
Yes,
was? And
and
there was a division that they had a whole losing record, but yet one of them had to go into the playoffs. Yeah.
the point I guess being is to a certain extent, one thing you have to do at the start, and this really I think encapsulates a lot of the issues that are going on with college football and how for years I guess most people were okay with the system, but there is enough ambiguity and there was clearly enough room for a couple of the big uns to kind of ruffle the feathers a little bit and all of a sudden create space where they had the resources and whatnot to walk into that space and go, look at us, we've got the space in here. Whether it's money and all that sort of stuff, there's been enough ambiguity and enough openness where these massive colleges can do it in the SEC, in the Big Ten. And this is something we're all learning. The world's changing, NIL's changing. At least with a professional league that's always looked at the athletes as professionals, unlike the NCAA, who still wants to treat them like amateurs. They've at least been able to keep with the flow, and as things grow, able to grow with it. Whereas the NCAA are really trying so hard to keep it all nice in the box, and it's not working. It's bursting, and the NCAA are about to burst with it. So I think you get to a point here, I guess, in a very, very long-winded way, I'm trying to poke a couple of holes in this idea because your franchises in the NFL have personally agreed to the terms and all
Yeah.
get a vote in how, and understand actually they're happy because the disparity between the 32 isn't as big enough for them to say, well, actually, the Dallas Cowboys, we all hate them, but they are a much wealthier team than, say, your Houston Texans. Dallas don't get 2 votes for Houston Texans, 1 vote, and we accept that. They agree to that, and there's no real wiggle room without it. However,
Yeah.
the
It's a
NCAA,
much
you're asking a
smaller
lot of
pool, though, isn't
colleges
it?
who've not had to deal with the same rules and regulations to now sit there and say, okay, we agree to this, and the second it doesn't go in their favour, go, oh, well, silly holes, what did we do? But okay, we'll go with it. They're going to do whatever we can. The Super League in European football would be a prime example of how a lot of big teams tried to make it so that big teams win, little teams do not.
Yeah.
And I think, like I say, I'm just trying to kind of, we've got some solutions going, which is
Yeah,
great,
there's
but I'm
definitely
trying to think of
discourse
what.
around it, isn't there? Because nobody knows the right answer. Nobody knows if there is
No,
a correct answer to it. It's what should, or what should be looked at, as Nick says. Take some of the NFL stuff and that equality and that balancing and strength of schedules and what they do very well, but maybe bring in some relegation promotion threats that
Yeah.
keep some of the games light towards the end of the season. Put a bit more oomph into some of those games, which are, we've all watched college games at the end of the season, and it's like, well, there's nothing riding on it. There's no bowl game. There's nothing. It's like, oh, just put your third strings in. Nobody really cares. Nobody's really watching.
yeah,
At least with relegation promotion, you can get rid of that, or some, incentivize you finish higher up in the standings, therefore you get a bit more money. Take bits and pieces of something else, but I think the problem is just sheer size, right? Because we talk about the NFL and 32 teams can all agree, and 32 teams and franchising, whatever else. It's a nice closed system. It's quite small. It's quite manageable. How many colleges did we say there were, Fletch?
thousands. In
173
Division 1, there's
in Division One
170.
alone. Yeah,
In Division 1, there's over 170. I think, actually, if you
take
enclose
all of
all
it.
the
Oh,
sports, it's in the 300s. But
yeah,
when you encapsulate kind of the FBS and FCS Division 1, you're talking at
yeah.
least 170. And then you look at D2 and D3 as well within that.
Yeah, it's just sheer. How do you proportion it up, and how do you not upset a college that thinks they should? And for people far beyond our
Yeah.
pay grade, definitely. But
I mean,
I can.
at this
Something needs
point,
to be done, as he says. Something needs to change. But
could you imagine? I think for me, it's just it's a case of you need to find that way. Like I say, the Premier League did what they did 20, 30 years ago and decided we want to make a lot more on TV, so we're going to create the Premiership, and it became a separate thing from the Division 1 of the top tier of English football and became its own business and did its own things its own way. And I think, like I say, it's going to be difficult in the same way it would be difficult asking Barcelona to sit in a room with Stockport County and say, we're equal in this.
mhm.
We're very much equal in the way European football, that UEFA should be run. Asking Barcelona to sit in a room with Stockport, it's not going to happen. Barcelona would be more than happy to sit in a room with AC Milan and say, okay, maybe we're equal in this. But they're not
Yeah,
going to do. They're not going to want to
we're
do
going to
it
do it
with
with
a third
Tranmere, are
tier.
they? Or yeah,
A third tier Romanian football team who half the team are plumbers during the week. It's not going to happen. So, yeah, it's to kind of, I guess, wrap up where we initially were. Where we're at now with this law, with this thing, is
oh yeah, that's
in
where we started.
December 2023. In December 2023, it was announced that FSU, the Board of Trustees, had unanimously agreed to take legal action on the ACC. Now, one thing we found out that day was the day before the ACC took preemptive legal action on FSU. And it was all with regards to this grant of rights and the challenge in the grant of rights. Agreement, not contract. Got you there, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
In March of this year, only a few weeks ago, Clemson filed their very own. As has already been mentioned, Clemson filed their very own. Basically the same lawsuit, but obviously on Clemson's behalf, not on FSU's behalf. So rather than having one big joint one to deal with, the ACC now have two to battle in two separate states. Finally, earlier this month, the Florida Attorney General has sued the ACC over the ACC's TV contract, the details of which are very, very lucrative, and the ACC don't want anybody to see them.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it very much in-house, and the Florida Attorney General believes that they should be public record in Florida, and they should be made publicly available. So that could, essentially the idea would then be that if people could see the TV deal that ACC had gotten, they would know whether the TV deal was just simply extremely underhanded, what those details were.
Where
So
the money
again,
actually went, who got paid, etc.
exactly.
It could, as we've just mentioned, it could be a whole other can of worms that gets opened where they suddenly go, oh, hang on, the TV deal was worth this much. Colleges are only getting this much, and where's all this other money being siphoned off, and who's getting all the rest of it? And that's, I think, why the ACC is suddenly definitely worried that now the Attorney General's got involved, because that takes it to a whole new level. It's not just kind of like teams against the ACC and stuff. It's like, that's the Attorney General. That's the Florida Attorney General who's turned up and gone, I want to have a look at the books.
If there's nothing wrong with the TV deal, why would you not show it? You know, if your TV deal is all above board and you did it to the best of your ability for your members,
for the good of the members and everything else. And
yeah.
There's only a small portion.
Why would you not show it? If you don't want to show it, then there is a reason why, and you can only be left to assume that reason is not very good.
Mm.
Well, it's the age-old saying: those who've done nothing wrong have nothing to hide. Not that we
times.
Right, just before we say disclaimer, we are not accusing the ACC of anything. If a letter comes through my door tomorrow, I am after both of you. We are not.
We were very clearly, we're very careful of what we said there. I don't think at any point in time we mentioned that we've said that the ACC have done anything underhand or illegal, but it's just there are grey areas and information that's not readily available to everybody. And until it is, then no clear-cut answers can be
exactly.
And
finally,
we covered ourselves.
Yes.
And
I cannot be held liable for anything these two gentlemen.
Nothing. I know. I've already signed a waiver. I'm all
right. So, in short, bit late, but in short,
bit short. An hour and a half later. Summing up.
ACC are being sued by two member schools in Florida State and Clemson, mostly due to a grant of rights, which basically has them legally binded to the ACC conference for until at least 2036, as it stands. Or not legally binded, sorry, but essentially binded and trapped within the ACC now until 2036. They want to find a way out because, as we've mentioned, the money that is in two other conferences is not. They feel that they are being slighted, for lack of a better term, slighted in this dealing, that they are not getting the money that they deserve or what they feel is fair. This isn't the only reason, but it is a major driving force behind it. Losing out on college football playoff spot this year really was the straw that broke the camel's back for Florida State. Do you know what the reported figure is? So with this grant of rights, there is a way out, actually. There is a way out. And you pay a buyout fee. Do you know what that fee roughly is, or is being reported as? Because I've got it here.
God. Moves around a bit, but I think it's
a Kit Kat and a packet of crisps.
It's insanely. It's so.
I'd make it.
I think I read somewhere like 100. $170 million, or am I getting that confused with something else?
It's not
That's not
170.
even. That's not. That doesn't even touch the surface of that. No, I'm thinking of the Pac-12 sort of retainer fee type thing. I think it's in the billions, isn't it? There's like
Not quite. Put it this way: if both FSU and Clemson pay it, they make over $1 billion. The ACC.
yeah,
Wow.
It's a lot of. It's reportedly around five. The figure that I've seen marked on a couple of different areas has been around $570 million. If you
to
want to
buy
buy out
out
of,
of the
if
grant.
you want to buy out, you pay $570 million and you're out. There's 10 years on that contract. But as draconian as that sounds, and this is one of the words that's being used at the moment, is draconian. They are the fees and whatnot are so high. But you think, was it Texas, and who was it who just paid to leave the Texas and one other school? I can't remember who it was who just paid. I think
Virginia?
they've just
No.
gone into the SEC. Is it SMU?
Uh,
Not SMU.
Old Miss? No.
Either way, Texas and this other school have just paid $50 million to buy out 1 year, the final year, to get out. $50 million each. So you're talking, it'd be slightly less than $50 million a year for the next 12 years if they were to buy themselves out of it now.
The question is how much do they? What you're looking at? Yeah, that's an awful lot of money. That's a silly
So,
amount of money. But
the
can you
suit,
put that in a payment plan and then offset that by going to a bigger
or
conference and earning more money?
and that might be one of the things they look towards. That might be one of the things that comes out with this suit. But actually, I think that two of the things you need to understand, kind of think, what's the outcome of this suit? What's the reasoning behind it? The reasoning behind it at this point is to leave the ACC. This is a none other. Clemson and FSU don't want to be in that conference anymore. They want to go into one of the big boys. That's fair. However, what the lawsuit is attempting to do is how they do it in the best way possible. The question being, can they, in an ideal world, the courts look at it and say, yeah, that was an illegal deal. You don't have to pay that. Just go. You don't owe them anything. Or that deal wasn't fair. It's
You owe them
illegally
one
binding.
season's worth or something. Yeah.
You don't. Yeah, maybe do a kindness payment or a whatnot of saying, look, we're sorry we're leaving, but here's a bit of money to tie you over for now. If the courts decide, they might be able to cut that significantly and come to a settlement of a fee and say $100 million rather than $570 million.
Yeah.
We don't know. The courts could completely rule in the ACC's favour and say, no, you pay that or you stay.
You signed it. You signed it. There's nothing in here that's untoward or whatever else, and you're stuck with it. And that could also
Exactly.
happen. But the fact that I think that Clemson are now doing the same makes me think that there's enough ambiguity, there's enough grey area, or there's enough wiggle room for a lawyer to get in there and to either, as you say, argue the case that they don't need to pay the whole amount for the whole length of the contract. There's a we're leaving, here's 1 year's payment, here's 50 million, see you later. We're
Here,
not paying 570 because that's over the length of the contract and there's enough grey area wiggle room for us to get out in 1 year's deal. And if that's
and
the case, then look out because that's going to be messy.
one argument I've heard, no, I don't want to get into politics. We're not going to get into politics. But the Attorney General is essentially it's a political position. And they're not going to attach themselves. In most politicians, they're not going to attach themselves to a losing horse. If they know that this has got traction, and they will attach themselves if they know there's something there to gain. So I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not calling out the Attorney General. I'm saying that she's only after this for something to gain. But
But But the Attorney General position is an elected position, and if the Attorney General supports a well-supported college in the state of Florida, can't do her election any harm if that wins, right?
No.
So,
No.
As you say, she won't hitch a wagon to a losing horse, or a horse that's going nowhere. So the fact that she's joined 3 or 4 months later, when a lot of discovery work and a lot of back and forth has already happened, to jump in and then kind of come in heavy-handedly saying, "Wait, I want part of this," seems to indicate that there's something there.
Well, one thing we have learned is that they did actually make that request, the official request to the ACC back in January for the TV deal, right? And they have, for the last 3 months, have said no, and they've basically made the whole kind of, it needs to be public information, and the ACC have not played ball. So it's only recently we found out that the Attorney General's got involved in it, but she has been involved in it since January, since not long after the FSU originally filed the suit. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you very much for today.
Okay. It's been deep. It's been pretty deep, actually, this one, isn't it? We've gone down a rabbit hole.
It was a struggle to start, but we got there, and really did get there in the end. Now, I will say one thing. I forgot earlier today to ask you the question to get the brains going. Now, I don't know if you want to get your brains going at this time on a Friday night, but I'm going to do it anyway because I've got it written down. And
You've got it written down. You've got to use it. Got to get it out there.
We'll take a couple of minutes on this one. It won't take long. Your little bit of trivia for the day. Can you tell me what was the longest game in college football history?
In time?
Officially. The official longest game in college football history.
It's got to be like a triple overtime game or something, right? Whew.
Is it recently?
It's quite recent.
Imagine so.
It
is. Wasn't there a double overtime game a couple of seasons back? No, you can go more than double overtime, can't you?
You can. You can go more than double.
It's got to be I want to say it's like a snow game, but they don't play late enough in the season, so that's really annoying.
It's either two crap teams or two really good teams.
That's where I'm trying to weigh it up, Nick. It's like, so you have two really bad teams that just couldn't score, or it's two really good teams that could score all the time. It's either like a Michigan Ohio State game or a Georgia Ohio State, or it's somebody like, and this is where you start to upset somebody who's listening, it's an Arizona State versus Oregon State or something like that. It's like, oh. Now, go on. You got the Fletch. What have you got?
So, in 2021, the Illinois Fighting Illini beat the Penn State Nittany Lions 2018. Nine
overtimes.
9 overtimes.
9 overtimes.
Hooey.
It was
9.
Illinois won 2018 at Penn State. It was an interesting game because actually, in preparation for today, because I thought I was going to ask you earlier and we could have had a bit more of a conversation about this, I watched the highlights from it.
What highlights?
Weren't many.
9 overtimes at 2018.
9 overtimes, 28. If you think 9 overtimes, right, you've scored. It must be like 60 points each. It's like 2018.
It's the highlights are about 8 minutes long. 8 minutes long. The game itself was actually there were a lot of really good defensive plays. And I mean, there were some brilliant defensive plays, and neither team wanted to win, which was fun. But it was like the equivalent of a penalty shootout, wasn't it? Where you go from you've got to do a load of 2-point conversions. No one could get it in. No one could get it in. No one
Was
could
it they
punch it
couldn't
in.
get it in, or they couldn't be bothered? Is it one of those end of season games where nobody cares, or was it
Well, it was. Let me get the date up here. It wasn't that far into like that.
Maybe
Oh,
they
so
were aiming
October
for the wrong
23rd.
goal.
October? So there's still potential things to play for. Wow, that's bizarre.
So
9 overtimes. Whew.
it
You're
was.
getting your money's worth for your ticket there, aren't you?
Oh hell yeah! But like,
Well,
actually, I watched those highlights. It was genuine. Like some of the defensive plays were fantastic. The offensive plays hit and miss, but the
hmm.
defensive plays were very, very good. And I think it was a genuine. I don't know, maybe from my perspective, I at least enjoyed some of that. Some of watching those highlights, they were fun, and then watching about 10. Well, there was 9 overtimes, so that'd be 18 2-point convert, like basically 18 2-point conversions in a row. That's fun.
Oh, that's different.
It
That's
it'd be
that's
like
tension and drama.
instead of a penalty shootout, you can only it's a corner shootout. You
Yeah,
you take a
or
corner
a free
instead.
kick shootout from further and further out. The more and more times you go.
It's
Wow,
it was
nine overtimes.
brilliant,
That's a good one.
and you
I vaguely remember a Pittsburgh Penguins game going like 5 overtimes, and there were like pictures of people asleep in the arena in their seat, as you know, because 5 overtimes at 20 minutes an overtime, and the thing, and it was like. For us, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the game's still going on, and like
Still
kids are
going.
asleep
What's
in their
good?
mum and dad's arms.
Just like, oh, can we
God,
go home yet? No, the game's not finished. Just like,
9
you'd think.
overtimes.
I don't know.
That's
I'm quite a competitive person. My wife can attest to this, and anybody I've ever played football with can attest to just how competitive. But at one point, I've just got to go. Do you know what? I can't be asked. You score. Go.
yeah, it's just like
No,
enough now.
seriously, don't.
Last goal wins. It's like, fuck, yeah, we've been playing for 60 minutes. Just go. Yeah, just
Like
that. You would at some point just go, I just get the bloody thing.
if I'm a keeper in something like I'm just standing at the post, like just do what you need to do. I want to go home.
Just hurry up, get on with it. But yeah, but dinner's ready.
Got
Yeah,
places to
that's
be.
crazy. Yeah. And I
But yeah,
suppose the
so
benefit, and then flip side for later on, one of the joys of watching college football in the UK is the time in terms of when the games are on. But we'll get into that at some other point. But that's one of the real benefits. Even that one, even if it went to 9 overtimes, it wouldn't be 2 or 3 or 4 in the
yeah,
morning. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. It depends on how it was. But Nick, as you say, it wouldn't be 6 a.m. like it is for long running NFL games or whatever, or long running
yeah.
NHL games because of the great benefit of what times the college game starts. But we'll get onto that in a different episode because we have spoken for a long time.
hey, that's my thing.
We'll talk about that later.
Stealing.
What do we call this podcast? We'll get to it later. College
We'll
football
talk about it
podcast.
later. Anyway,
It's been
gentlemen,
a
I
pleasure,
appreciate
boys. It really has.
like I said, the problem with episodes like this, I think, at this point, and we're gonna learn this as we go along, but we're trying to make this as informational and as informative as possible, while at the same time trying to get to this point where we're engaging and having a conversation. But we kind of need to battle through the information first.
It's a lot of information going on at the moment. As we say, it's so much is changing that you're trying to keep up with the news and trying to. Hey, the news is there's this lawsuit, but if people out there go, "Frick does that mean to me? I don't know. Understand? There's a lawsuit, so what?" So you kind of got to go right. The history is all of this stuff's happened and whatever else, and that's why they're doing the lawsuit. And as you say, Fletcher, it can get a bit. It's quite deep, and we've got into a lot of depth today.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like we know what we're talking about. Winner.
Yeah, and until we get a DM off someone, just like, where are you getting this information
What
from?
are you talking about? Yeah.
But
Speaking of which, our DMs are always open.
yes, and again, I said this in a post on the AAW network the other day. Look, there are a lot of people at the moment who just getting past the draft. Maybe they're very excited about college football. Maybe they're very excited about getting into the NFL over the next few weeks. And if you're new to it, please reach out, because look, I've gone in and made very many stupid comments on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and been laughed at because I've said something like I've I've complained because the Lions and Packers is a divisional game, so why are they showing the Jets versus Patriots? That was one of my favourite early ones. So we were all new to this once. We were all, we are. I can't actually. I don't know Nick that well. He might bite. I don't know, but me and Gary do not. So please feel free, give us a shout. We're always happy to have a chat with you. We're always happy to bring people on board. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Our word isn't gold. We just a bunch of guys who know a bit about football. We're more than open for more people to come along, talk about their knowledge, talk about their support, talk about what they know, etc. More conversation, more learning. As Sam said when he's here last week, we learned a lot last week when we started to delve into some of the rivalries and how long they've been going and stuff like that. So every week we learn something new about football. So bring it on.
Nick, do you bite? I need to know. Because I don't want to go out spreading misinformation about you.
I do. I like to think I am in control most of the time. There are moments where I bite, and yeah.
Oh, so, I meant an actual kind of bite, not an unwound up kind of bite. I was a bit worried.
Not a snappy sort of like throws out a snappy comment.
Like,
no, he
like
actually.
Sometimes that's GBH, my friend.
Sometimes depends if you like it though.